Welcome to Chamber Talk, brought to you by North Orange County Chamber, where we explore the stories and insights of leaders, business owners and CEOs from various sectors who are making a difference in our community and region. Whether you're tuning in via podcast or joining us via video, we're glad to have you here. Welcome back to another episode of Chamber Talk. Today we have a guest who is no stranger to our programme or to the community he serves. Joining us once again is Mayor of Fullerton, the Honourable Fred Jung. Fred has served on the City Council since November 2020 and has been selected by his fellow council members to serve as Mayor 4 times in 2022, 23, 24 and again this year in 2026. That level of trust and fellow council members speaks volumes above the leadership and his commitment to the city. This is also Fred's 4th appearance on Chamber Talk. He joined us last time in 2023 for episode 22, and then again in 2024 for episode 43, where he served some very personal reflections about his battle with cancer. And later in the episode 64, as he began discussing his candidacy for the 4th District seat of Orange County Board of Supervisors. Today, thank you very much, Fred, for coming by, or should I say Mayor Jung. Really appreciate you coming back onto the show again.
No, sir, it's always a pleasure to be on the show and help support our glorious Fullerton Chamber, also known as the North Orange County Chamber.
That is totally correct. We're Fullerton Chamber of Commerce, DBA.
That's right.
North Orange County Chamber. That's
Don't
totally
worry,
correct.
I won't let you forget.
That's good. So, Fred, if I may first off start, it's great having you back. And obviously here for the 4th time. But as we mentioned before, obviously you first mentioned last time you were on the episode that you were battling your cancer diagnosis. And I just wanted to catch up with you. How are you doing with that? How far are we along?
I'm really honored to be here. I suppose I've done a half-decent job to be asked back again. There's folks that have either dealt with cancer, battled it personally, or have a loved one that have gone through this, realize it's an ongoing battle. It doesn't end. It is a remarkably challenging thing to crowbar into your life, to be able to come to terms with some things. I spoke about this at the Mayor's Prayer Breakfast last year. And I hope I did a half-decent job in being eloquent on it. But it is a uniquely head-scratching thing to be able to come to terms with your mortality when you're 52. It is something that rarely we think about, death on that kind of level, certainly not our own. But when you do, there's a few things that are that I found surprising. One, just the compassion and the sheer will of those around you, most whom you don't know, certainly pray on your behalf and wish you well. And they pull for you in many different ways, pull you in many different ways. And the other thing is it's a little liberating. And I know that seems odd to say, but it is. When you're not clinging to life so much, there is a level of freedom involved that affords you the opportunity to make perhaps better choices, be a little bit more open to things, not so narrow-minded. Perhaps even more driven and goal-oriented. And it becomes a exercise in how to better yourself long-term, not just your health, but mentally. A lot of different things you get to analyze when you're having to sit there for 3 hours in an infusion center and then take home homework on top of that. In a fanny pack. Those are difficult things, and you do it enough over time, and certainly the medication has severe side effects to it, severe effects, period. It just is. It was a remarkably challenging year, 2024. In the midst of that, I happened to go through a re-election campaign that you can't campaign for. You're immunocompromised, you're too weak, so you can't knock on doors. You just have to have great faith in the public that the things that you've done, the accomplishments that you've helped the city take, that they reward you for that. And certainly they were kind enough to do that. So it's a struggle. This is a very long way to say a very short thing. It is a battle.
And so, as you were going through all this, personally, everybody has their own thoughts about these types of things. But what kept you going? What kept you able to get to the next step? Because I'm sure you've got to show some very inner strength because you're a family man, got children, got a wife, parents. Like, how do you deal with all that?
Well, you got to have purpose. That is critical. And the more you take on, I found, at least in my journey, and I'm not to say that this is the best way or the way, you end up, for me, I needed a reason to get up in the morning. I needed a reason to eat 3 square meals a day to hold my weight intact. Because there's a point in the treatment where everything tastes like newspaper or cardboard.
Oh, dear.
And as a result, you don't want to eat. It dulls down everything, including your appetite, and there is a weight cliff that you can reach and fall off of, and that becomes really unhealthy, and there's a dramatic impact as a result of something like that. So I wanted to be really conscious about eating, making sure that I kept my weight. During treatment, I actually gained weight, which was unique. But getting up in the morning requires purpose and having more things to do rather than less. Having more assignments, more meetings, more people that I had to interact with and assist in some sort of marginal capacity that I could. It certainly helped. And I think between the power of prayer and the power of purpose, if there's a finish line, I get to it because of those two and a combination of.
Well, I'm glad you did make it.
Thank
So
you.
I'm very happy about that. So you mentioned there a little bit about obviously how it makes you look through a different lens in life. Do you think that is another additional experience to your repertoire of experience, that now maybe a mindset, you think of things a little bit differently when you approach our world's situations or things like that?
Well, that's a great question. I would certainly not recommend this route for anybody. This is a very painful and arduous march to get to some level of enlightenment. I think you could read a book or two and perhaps get there a little quicker. But I'm a fairly dense man, stubborn in many different ways. And when you're sick, you don't have the time and the energy to be stubborn anymore. So one of the values that I come out of this on the other side, if indeed, again, this is a lengthy process and it requires, a good deal of my attention over the very short and long term. If there's anything I come out with, I did understand and have a better understanding of the value of time. And that this world government, if I can just kind of articulate just that, part and parcel it, there has to be a sense of urgency that I don't think necessarily exists in most of government, in most of life. Everybody, again, when you confront your mortality, you realize, time isn't on my side, that much of my life is behind me, not necessarily in front of me. And so for me, selfishly, I've become very astute, very aware of time and the value of it. Other people's in particular.
Now, on that point, sort of breaking into the next part, is that I wanted to ask you a question. One thing that people don't really realise is, particular if you're the mayor, because you're sort of like the chairperson of the dais, there's a lot of passionate talk, sometimes heated public discussions. And, if anybody ever watches some of the council meetings, they can be quite intense. So I suppose my main question to you is, with you having so many years now of experience in this, how does that affect your sort of like you personally, not just only as a council member?
Well, I'm not a robot, so when folks yell in the negative, there is an impact. If folks yell in the positive, which is rare in my case, there's a cause and effect there too. What I encourage those who do the yelling to think about is see the humanity in it all. One of the great criticisms I often get as the chair of the council is that I'm not looking up often enough, or if at all. And that could be true. That's a fair criticism. That said, you don't know why I'm staring down. And 100% of the time, I'm writing what you're saying. Because it's important to me to remember the requests that you had, the manner in which you said it, why you said it, perhaps if you delineated that in your comments. Again, it's 3 minutes of comments. It's not a lot. You're not telling me your life story, and I'm certainly not telling you mine because I can't respond to you.
Right.
That's not how council meetings work. This isn't jazz where it's call and response. You play a note and I play one to contradict the note. That's not what happens. So more often than not, I'm there to listen. I do it astutely. The manner in which I learn, there's a manner in which I learn well, and that has to do with writing it all down, rereading it after the fact. So I have not just a casual understanding of what you said, but as thorough as I can, because you took time out of your day to come and say something. Regardless of my time, I certainly should value yours. So it's one of the main criticisms. The other thing that you'll find, this happens a lot, is you are the lightning rod of whatever it is, and rightfully so, because you are one of 5 votes. But there are 4 others, and I often find that if you do this governance and governing well, that you do the work beforehand. Much of what we do is behind the scenes. A lot of the votes that we take outside of closed sessions are in public, and they should be. And we're not tasked to make a decision on things like public hearings. You're supposed to adjudicate them as you see them in real time. But for the most part, outside of public hearings, majority of the council has some idea how they're going to vote based on their value system, based on the things they believe in, the things they trumpet and run on. Those qualities do not dumb down over time. They don't get lessened. They get worse. They get amplified. So what I would encourage the public to do all the time, I've said this since I got elected, is have conversations with elected officials. Have them outside of a council meeting when they're not on camera, and afford them courtesy of hearing what they have to say. You may be able to sway them, you may not, but in the end, they have a compassionate understanding of where you're coming from, and perhaps you have some de minimis understanding of where they're coming from.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was a question I was thinking about. Is, you're very right. Is you can't speak on the public comment. The public comment only knows what they know. However, there's this miscommunication in between things that go on, regardless what city you're at, is where or how do you better communicate? And your thing there was, reach out to your council member and see if you can have a meeting. Is there another way for the public to respond through to the city where they could be a little bit more informed or get a little bit more involved, so they can understand a little bit about more the dealings you have to deal with for them to be better educated? Or
Well, you count on, really, and we are afforded the incredible value of it, is media. And you want media that's not state-sponsored, that gives perspectives. But what I find now with even media is we are politically so hypersensitive, and we are so captivated inside of our own silos. Certainly social media has not helped that. It's accelerated that. That media has now followed suit. There was a time in my lifetime, more so than without, where you didn't have partisan news. You had the news.
Yeah.
And it was researched. It wasn't opinion-based. They didn't trumpet a candidate or a elected official, regardless of what it was. They didn't wish the president ill will. They wanted the president to succeed because his success so far, again, all he so far, was the country's success. And their job as members of the media was to inform the public, not misinform them. And I find that a lot of times our rush to get the story, our rush to get the soundbite, our rush to get the first to post, to get the likes or the hits or whatever it is, the views, it has lessened journalistic practices that have been around for generations and proven to work. And I think when we question the integrity of journalism, we question a lot of other things that follow as a result of that domino falling. It's not great for our country, and it's certainly not great for local politics. So I always encourage those that want to be in the know to stay better informed by reading all sources. You'll get different perspectives, much like reading a textbook. I rely on your great judgment and your moral character and the things that you went through, both young and old, to determine what your facts are. Especially now, if we're having issue with facts and we don't have a clear definition of what that is anymore, then I would certainly encourage everybody to go to as many sources as possible, even those that disagree with you.
Now, there's a lot of talk, isn't there, online? What you're discussing about here is, I would explain it as noise, right? It's just extra noise around you. And so how much of that really does affect the diocese or even the city as a whole, whether it helps or it doesn't help, affect the city business? Because when that's going on, you're not really paying attention to something else. So how does that sort of like diverse its way through?
Well, hopefully you have elected officials that can witness it, address it, but continue to meet the city's goals, the objectives, and, in the case of most cities, continue to provide services and generate revenue. That said, these are all human beings that are up there.
Right.
And they are all impacted psychologically, emotionally, mentally by things that are said. And that noise, while fair in some cases, more often than not, isn't. It is partisan by nature, ill-informed, or more often than not informed at all, perhaps even misinformed. And when you have all of that, it makes for a very bad soup. The recipe isn't great, and it doesn't benefit great governance. I think while everyone's voice is incredibly important, we should be fairly mindful about how we utilize that.
Now, slightly going off topic here a little bit, because it was just running through my mind. You've been mayor multiple times now. You've been on the dais of a very large city here in Orange County. It's probably North Orange County, one of the largest, and dealt with a lot of difficult situations and issues over the years. So what made you suddenly decide you want to have more run for Orange County Supervisor, if I may ask?
Sure. I think you have to believe to some degree that you're making a difference. I don't think you could do it otherwise. I don't know that the notion of having something on a business card or having an office that says something, having people stand up when you walk into the room is enough to go through the mental torture of being in the public eye and being an elected official and having the burden, and it should be, and the weight, and it should be, of decisions that you make. I think you have to believe to some degree that you are making a difference. My belief is that I am. And whether or not you agree with me or not, I have to serve you. And I should hope that if in the end, when voters go to the ballot and they decide and they judge your work collectively, I should hope that they affirm that you are indeed the correct choice for them. And so far, that's been the case for me.
Now, it's a big step, isn't it, when someone comes forward and really volunteers their time and energy and parts of their life to represent a community. What steers you to do that? What stirs you inside to even go ahead and put your name down on those ballots and want to try and serve the community you live in?
For me in particular, and I can't speak for others,
Sure.
I'm sure their reasons are different, and that's fair. For me, it was always I wanted someone who looks like me to fundamentally understand that you can get somewhere else. You can dream something larger. You can do something bigger. That barriers don't exist in this country as they do in others. And it is not only considered a melting pot for a reason, but it's considered the bastion of democracy for a reason. The land of opportunity. These are all things that we firmly believe as Americans. It's why we struggle to come here, struggle to live here, struggle to make our generational life better. So for me, I wanted to do something very simple. Represent perhaps a voice in a community that didn't have it before. Be one that moved the needle in a positive way for that community. And it doesn't mean that I'm not Fullertonian first or an Orange County resident first. Just means that there are things that I have from a heritage perspective, legacy perspective, cultural perspective that hopefully makes, again, us more diverse, us more egalitarian in the long run.
Now, you've lived in Fullerton, over 27 years or so, I believe?
Oh, way longer than that.
Way longer than that?
86, 87.
Oh,
so
shoot, okay.
It's been a bit.
And then obviously your kids went to school there. You've helped out in the school there in other capacities. So talking about, different aspects and the way people go around life. Do you feel in your position as a local elective, are you presumed to be or act differently between the different types of communities? So what I'm supposed to spelling out here is, does the Korean population expect something different of you than maybe other people do? And how do you balance through that if that's the case?
Well, they expect me to speak the language, which I struggle with at times.
Okay.
More often than not, I need to use Google Translate as much as anybody else would. That said, you don't want to get lost in this pursuit of being everything to everyone.
Right.
Boy, you're going to be chasing that tail for a very long time. So in the end, hopefully, you do what my mother used to say all the time: if the bucket leaks indoors, it'll leak outdoors. So you want to be the same as much as you can and hold on to the same values, because for the most part, my experience so far in life has been we all yearn for the same things. We all pursue the same things. And that just because you're from one culture or one religion or a different country Doesn't mean we're not all united in some magnanimous way. So I keep that in mind, that for the most part, we all value the same things. And if my values adhere to yours, then, perhaps along the line, you'll see me worthy of your vote.
I totally agree with you. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I came to America. It's a fantastic place to be and do well in.
I'm better.
I'm better. You're right. I'm better. I have a question. I'm going to read it off because I didn't write this. Somebody else sent it in. So one of the things that we see across the country right now, and certainly sometimes here locally, and it's increasing, is this polarized political environment that we have right now. And people often describe it as a us versus them type of atmosphere. From your perspective, as someone sitting in the middle of it all, what do you see? What's your take on all that?
I think social media is, again, it's easy to blame social media, but there's blame there. And I think we'd be ignorant and complacent if we didn't believe that, because it's true. The algorithms that they operate on require you to stay on, and you will stay on a lot more if you fear something, if you're angry at something, than if you're happy at something or you were pleased. It's just the nature of kind of our wiring. The negative seems to be a lot more attractive to screen time. And because of that engagement, we have gone down, I think, forks in the road and chosen paths that I don't know would have been done if we had the same issues. The issues that we have in Fullerton, the issues that we have in Orange County, California, the country as a whole, have not really changed much in the last 100 years.
Right.
Folks still struggle to survive. They want to raise their children as much as they can, better than with a better life in front of them than they had. These things are all common beliefs and common goals and common aspirations. What's changed, I think, is the manner in which we receive information and the pace at which we're asked to digest it all. If you think about social media and then part and parcel out AI, we wait perhaps 3 seconds for answers.
Yeah.
When it was before this fairly laborious process of going to the library or going to an encyclopedia, checking out a book, reading a paragraph. There are very few things that involve any of that anymore. And I think because of that, your body becomes, and your mind in particular, becomes accustomed to reactionary emotions, reactionary decision-making, reactionary thought. And I don't know that reacting is always positive. I find that, what works for me anyhow, as well as those I respect, is pragmatism, being very slow in the process, honoring procedure, and realizing that there's nuances within that. And seeing that not all perspectives are correct, but not all perspectives that aren't yours are wrong either. And being able to kind of just be very judicious in how you accept that information, how you digest it in particular, I think is going to be very important as technology continues to outpace us all.
You mentioned something there that really resonated with me was, how part of being in America, in particular, compared to anywhere in Europe, for my case, is that there are things that are really always amazing about America. So, there were good school systems. People could own homes. People could have a car, go on vacation, barbecue at the weekend, things like that. And these are sometimes things that have become quite hard to achieve, although really, like you're saying, that's just really what we're all trying to do. Do you feel that moving forward in your even political career, if you're going forward to looking at being on the Orange County Supervisor board, do you think we could get somewhat close back to some of that, whether it's to do with, yes, a real affordable housing, or whether, this expenditure of spending everything everywhere else and there's not much for the population? Do you think we could somewhat get a little bit closer to how it was a little bit?
Well, I'm not a real estate agent by profession, nor do I play one on TV. But if you speak to those that have been in the profession for a very long time, they will tell you that housing prices ebb and flow. They'll tell you that there are times when housing prices were very low and housing stock was very high, and home sales were at all-time lows. There'll be other times where housing prices are skyrocketing and everybody's buying a home. Demand is outpacing supply. I think for us as folks that have children that or of an age where we're now looking in the rearview mirror a lot more than we are looking in the front one, I think we have to figure out affordability. If you see that at one point in time, this wasn't that long ago, gas prices were 99 cents a gallon. And that was when I was in high school. And my youngest son is in high school now, and it's $5. I think we need to be able to answer to that generation why that is. Mm-hmm. And if we can't, I don't know that you should sleep well at night. We should be able to answer why things are the manner in which they are. You should be able to explain these things. And if you can't, there's a problem there that we have to solve. And it's the same thing as, the crisis that we went through, perceived or otherwise. I've certainly felt it with the price of eggs, milk, beef. Well, we got all used to higher prices, and guess what happened? They never went down.
Oh.
We just got used to it. And I think that's the ultimate goal of, business, is if we get used to it, they will continue to charge that because they know that that's the rate of return for us. I think we as consumers have to start making choices. We as government have to start making choices and start valuing the fact that we may be taking an entire generation out of home ownership. And I just never thought that would happen in my lifetime. And that's coming quicker than it is the other way. And I would encourage everybody to think about affordability on a macro scale. Not, we need more housing stock, which we do. But it shouldn't be just a one, silver bullet solution. We should be looking at every option to try and move the needle so the next generation has a better opportunity. I mean, if ultimately that's what we're looking to do, we're not doing the best job of it currently. I think we can do a lot better.
Now, looking at this, because, you see this from a bird's eye view, very close in as well, by being part of a strong, large city. Do you feel that is something that cities can start changing, where they look at using further out of city boundaries to build, or whether it is a state thing or a county thing? Where do you see that type? I mean, obviously everybody needs to work at it, but where do you see a start to that?
Well, a lot of the cities, Orange County has 34, and probably 20 of them, 25 of them maybe, are in the same unique, it's not unique, scenario of budget.
Right.
And figuring out how to provide the most amount of services with the revenue that you have. The issue that we continuously find ourselves in is the cost of services never goes down, but the rate of revenue sometimes does. So you have to figure out, okay, from a budget standpoint, what is actually discretionary. It would surprise most folks, but most municipalities, only about 30% or less is actually discretionary. That 70% plus of the budget is that's cemented in.
Right, it's running the city basically.
It is the cost of services.
Right.
So I'll give you an example of something that happened. In the city of Fullerton, much like there are a lot of cities in Orange County that have been impacted by the federal government's immigration policy, regardless of what you think about the policy itself, there are residents that have said, this has negatively impacted my community. As a result, I want you to establish funding to support that community that's been impacted by it. Fair. It is a fair ask. What they don't realize, and what the argument that they were often making to me was, 100,000, 200,000 it's a drop in the budget of a city that has, $100 million budget, let's say, for example. You're right, it is. But what you don't realize is the city of Fullerton, like most cities, is operating on a paper deficit. Mm-hmm. That means we are operating in the negative. And while we have reserves, those reserves are needed to cover that hole that is in the budget. So when folks say, well, you have $30 million or $10 million in reserves, we can afford $200,000 for aid of some sort, whatever aid that may be. What they're forgetting is, and perhaps they're not, perhaps they have a clear understanding of it, but it would help the discussion more if they understood that budgets are not necessarily always reflective of council or citizen priorities.
Right.
Oftentimes they are locked in mechanisms for services in the city, and there's very few dollars left in terms of percentage for discretionary spending, and that doesn't even change at the county level. It's the same at the county too. So if they knew that a little bit more, I think the asks that they have and the expectations they have of those asks would, I think, slightly change.
Now, mentioning that on the budget part, Fullerton's a very senior city. Its infrastructure's been around for a very long time. And part of that budget that you're talking about, because obviously people mention it about fixing roads and things like that, but then there's more to do with infrastructure, isn't there? How do you look at, obviously you can't afford these other bits and pieces, but how do you look at maybe moving forward and being able to afford these other things that just keep Fullerton running?
It is incredibly difficult to try and find ways to band-aid infrastructure. And at a certain point, and we've certainly reached it in the city of Fullerton, you are behind. And it gets worse every year. You're right. More and more behind. And that exponentially gets worse through the decades. So if you defer maintenance over 20 years, well, it's going to cost you that 20 years worth of maintenance plus all the accelerated costs of the additional increases that come with time. So you have to be very proactive about responding to it. But you said a great question. How do you do that when you don't have the funding to be able to triage all of it? Well, that's what you're doing then. You're just triaging things. And the things I encourage folks to understand is my council colleagues and I, when I first got on, cut the budget. We actually reduced it. Mm-hmm. And we did it willingly so based on what we saw around the corner. But we knew that, again, our employees at the city, the services cost more. We were outpaced by virtually every city. So losing senior knowledge, expertise to other places. And when that happens, there is a cause and effect to that really diminishes service, the pace of it, the sense of urgency that I talked about. you lessen that because there's catch-up time for a new employee to have to learn something. So you have to compensate employees accordingly because, again, they are the ones providing the service. It's certainly not me. I'm not at the counter issuing you a permit. I'm not addressing your water bill. There are folks that do that in our city, and we have to afford them a living to do that, right? So you push these things forward. Well, these increases in salary and compensation and benefits come at a cost. And revenue doesn't always pace that cost.
Right.
Because let's say, folks talk about it all the time. They'll say economic development is really important. It's a good enough word. What does that mean to you, though? You know, it's like saying world peace. Okay, well, what does that mean to you? Because it may be different than what it means to me, and it certainly may be different in practice. Well, economic development, I'll give you an example. Let's say you've got a Costco that comes in, and that's economic development. It certainly is. But you've got to build that Costco. You've got to stock it. You got to staff it. You got to open the doors. People have to shop in it. And then you have economic development. That required time. So how do you get to that point where now revenue starts outpacing expenses? Well, you can do it one of two ways. Either increase revenue through more of these Costcos at a faster pace, or you can lessen expenses. And I assure you, when it comes to government, lessening expenses is very difficult. It's more challenging than generating revenue. So you go to the easy, right? Easy low-hanging fruit. Let's go after revenue. Well, that takes time. So you have to be able to go, okay, how can we do this? And in the city of Fullerton, what we've decided was, let's try and do a special tax measure that addresses infrastructure only, and in particular and specifically. Requires a much higher threshold to go about achieving that, but now you have dedicated funding through this measure to address the incredibly aging infrastructure that we have in our city. And my hope is if they entrust government with that expense, again, dedicated to that project and those projects, and we're able to prove to the voters that we are good stewards of their money. Hopefully, they can afford us the trust and good faith to do other mighty things in government as well.
Now, you mentioned a few things there, and going back to your scenario about Costco, and then obviously the amount of people that go to Costco and shop there, that now takes wear and tear on the road, that now takes wear and tear on the piping, on the drainage, and all the rest of the things that go on, which is what you're talking about, which almost makes me think that the dais today is facing problems that could have maybe have been massaged back in the day, and now it's all your fault. That's the way people look at it, isn't it? It's your problem, your fault. So with this tax idea or incentive, how much more do you think you're able to be able to balance out your budget so then it works in a positive way for the city and everybody who's involved with Fullerton?
Well, the more tools that politically you're able to have, that the public entrusts you with, the better off I find city government will be, the better off your city will be. That if you are all about property tax revenue, for example, and you're just going to rely on the market continuing to go up, well, that's not often the case. Sometimes you've got down markets. We're in one right now. Where there isn't a dramatic fall in home prices, but they are going down quite a bit from where they were. And if you are solely relying on that to do your budgets and to adjust your rate of governance and your rate of service, boy, I don't know that that's the answer. And if you're sales tax oriented, and more folks are purchasing things online and less at brick and mortar stores. What happens to all these corner lots that have had underperforming commercial? All of these things compound if not addressed in a timely manner. And, the chickens come home to roost, I suppose. So you have to be forward thinking. I tell folks that it's fair to judge me right now, but I think you'd have a better, more complete look at the decisions and the votes that I've taken 10 years from now. That it requires usually that length of time to determine whether or not something worked or perhaps didn't or could have been better. I mean, it'll always be better, but I think it just requires that level of patience to see that most of the things that we do don't have immediate returns.
Now, just out of interest, 5 years, 6 years on council now, how much more do you feel this? Is there a gap, I suppose is the question, is when you come on council, not that you were a young man then, but you were a younger man, but, when you come on council to today, what do you feel the vast experience or difference is that you would look into yourself compared to Fred 2020 to Fred today?
Well, I'm certainly older, and I don't know that I'm wiser. And I suppose there'd be folks that say I'm not, and that's fair. The one thing I did and I do better at right now is the work behind the work. That you have to be a fairly good study, and that requires time. That you have to have a fairly clear understanding of what you are voting on, and the impact that it'll have, not just on the community today, but what Fullerton, or in the case of Orange County, will look like 25 years from now when perhaps you're not around anymore. Certainly from an elected official perspective, none of us are going to be around that long in Fullerton and Orange County. Both have term limits. Orange County is 8, Fullerton is 12. A lot of times the policies you enact may not bear fruit for 10, 15 years. That perhaps a trail that you created required 5 years to get funding, an additional 3 years to build, and 2 years for people to actually walk on. That a park that you refurbished, all of these things, buildings that you entitled and permitted, go through cycles. There's let's say a builder that gets an entitlement for a project, runs out of capital funding, so that project remains in a holding pattern. And then perhaps another builder comes on and tries it, takes a swing and misses. And then finally on the third builder try, 15 years later, something actually gets built there. These things and time is what you're up against all the time. And I don't have the luxury like some cities where there is, no term limits, and you have folks that have been on council for 30, 40 years, and they're synonymous with the city. When you think of the city, you think of that elected official, which is really weird to say, but there are some cities that are like that.
Yeah.
I certainly don't want to be that. I don't think I deserve to be that steward, and I certainly hope I'm not. And I wouldn't want to be on council 12 years. To me, that may be a few years too long. I think you're there to be as effective as you can be, and if you feel that you can't, you should have the capacity within yourself to remove yourself from the equation, allow someone else to take up the baton. But so long as you are, and you feel that you are, still effective, that you can get things done, that there are positive things that you are doing, then I think you march on.
Now, talking about stewardship, leading a very large city like Fullerton, what is it, a little over 320,000 strong or whatever, and working through with budgets and as tight as it's been, yet you guys are all still running through. What sort of perspective or big challenges do you see facing the supervisor's role, which is obviously you're managing multi-million-dollar budgets with, sort of like millions of residents. How do you see your experience tilting into helping the county?
The governor of California, I happen to have it was good fortune and circumstance, be in a room that he was in, and he was talking about how he valued being a mayor, and that experience of being a mayor taught him so much more than being lieutenant governor or anything else, because being an executive in government, there's hardly any difference between, it's just scale.
Right.
But having the capacity to run a city like Fullerton and to be a good steward for it, along with your council members, that's almost a direct line of sight to what you would, the skill sets that you would need, the patience that you would need, the sense of urgency that you would need at a county level. Again, you have 5, elected members of the Board of Supervisors, and they govern on behalf of the 3.5 million residents that exist in Orange County and call it home. And having that level of executive experience that has been weather tested, battle born, I think is invaluable. I don't know that level of experience can be purchased.
Now, what happens to, obviously, let's say you're getting through into the primary area here, and there's only maybe 1 or 2 running for the Orange County Supervisor level. What happens to the city side of your job, role, volunteer part? What transpires there as we're moving forward?
That's a great question. Well, one, I'm not a candidate first, and I suppose there are a few folks that would act in that manner and behave in that way. That's not me. I am tasked and elected to manage and govern and be a good steward for the city of Fullerton. That will always be my paramount concern, regardless of whether or not the voters in Orange County, certainly the 4th District, deem me worthy of being a county supervisor. I'm still the mayor of Fullerton, and I will act that way, and I will govern myself appropriately in that manner. I don't dress for the job I want. I dress for the job I have.
So the relationship between cities and the county plays an important role in how services are delivered, and the collaboration between those levels of government can be quite meaningful towards residents. Where do you feel that the tie-in between the cities working with the county and the county with the state? Because as we were going back before, this polarized lens, we think it's them and us, but really it's not. How do you see it all working together?
Well, for the county in particular, let's just take the 4th District, and you have the cities within it. Stanton, you have portion, not all of, but about less than a third of Anaheim. Fullerton, Buena Park, La Habra, Placentia, Brea. All of those cities have different and various requests, needs. The city of Stanton may want Beach Boulevard cleaned up, and the renowned level of human trafficking that they once had, they've gotten so much better as a result of policing and as a result of good governance on the part of that city council and their staff. That may be what they want and what they're looking for funding for. City of Buena Park may want force multipliers for their tourism. And the corridor that we call Beach Boulevard, that's Koreatown. The city of Fullerton may want funding for infrastructure. They may want funding for policing. City of La Habra may require something different. You have to have boots on the ground, particularly your own, in all of these varying cities to have a clear understanding of what it is that they need, and then can pivot and be nimble enough to address those needs year after year. And I find that as we get bigger in government, we're starting to ignore the fact that we need to be responsive. That response levels, this sense of urgency that I keep talking about, becomes slower. We lose it, that sense of urgency. And it's this notion of time is on our side. And it isn't. And if you've experienced where time is now your enemy, you'd realize we're in a race, and you'd want to, dress appropriately. You'd want to run at that pace, and certainly not fall behind. So I think in terms of the county's relationship with its, member and sister cities, you want to walk hand in hand in concert with them. You want to really be a good force multiplier for what they're trying to do, because again, that city may have differing needs than the city right next to it.
Now, one of the things you mentioned there was boots on the ground, and I feel that's very important. I mean, it's something that the Chamber tries to do very advocaately for its members. But when you're doing a job like the Orange County Supervisor's role, obviously you're also pulled on many different committees and things like that. And as you're mentioning, time it's very narrow. How do you see yourself being able to get that time to be boots on the ground? Because there's quite a few cities, and granted, everybody does have different ideas and things they need. How do you feel you're going to be able to accomplish that?
Well, that's a great question. I think I've been fortunate enough to have already a fairly good off-ramp and on-ramp to all of that. And by that, I mean I serve on a lot of regional committees as it is right now. So each supervisor has a seat at Orange County Transportation Authority because it's their district. I sit on that already. I'm the current vice chair. I'll be chairman next year, regardless of what happens in the election, hopefully. Orange County Power Authority, I've been the chair there. When you talk about Orange County Water District, I'm on that board. If you talk about the Metropolitan Water District, I've been on that board for 5 years. I'm on state boards. I'm on SCAG, Cal Cities. I've chaired committees there. All in all, I serve on 20 plus different committees or commissions or agencies and districts. You learn very quickly how to schedule something so simple as that. And that a constituent meeting is a higher priority than perhaps these committee meetings sometimes. And so you miss a meeting here and there, and that's okay. There's nobody that bats 100%. Our schedules are our schedule, but you always want to prioritize constituents first, businesses first, and then, go about the governance of these other agencies. Because, these boards have 4, 5, 10, sometimes 30 other folks that serve on it. And they're all, they're all principled people that, while you may disagree on certain issues, that they all want what's best, and try to, keep the agency better and the public that they serve better. So you have to trust that decisions will get, made in accordance with that longer view, and address the constituents and the businesses as a priority first.
Now, one of the things that I've noticed about yourself compared to some is obviously on city council, when sat there, you're supposed to be definitely non-partisan. However, you really are not that you don't talk about politics, or you don't lean one way or another, which, obviously we see that a lot today. Do you mind sharing what you feel the strength of that is, and how you manage to keep that level playing field?
Well, I don't know that it's a strength. Certainly these days,
Would be my job.
It's probably a weakness to not be partisan, but the job itself is not. Folks may realize when they get a ballot, which thankfully these days is not that often. But when there is an election, if you look on the ballot for city council, for mayor, the position of mayor, if you have an elected mayor, or even at the county board of supervisors. There isn't an R or an I or a D anywhere associated with that name. And that's by design. You are expected to do what is best for that municipal agency, that city, that county. You are supposed to act in the best interest of all of them, not be pulled one way or another by political dogma or partisan rhetoric, or even political donors. Now, are there instances where politicians run amok, do things that go against the grain of why they maybe even initially started? Sure. And these crestfallen politicians are in the news, and we're well aware of their antics and their shortcomings and their malfeasance for a reason. But by and large, I have found the colleagues that I serve with do it for the right reason, even if we disagree. Again, I tell folks, if I agree with you 75% of the time, doesn't make me your enemy 25%. We're aligned on most things. And that even on a council like ours, where folks may only see 3-2 votes or 4-1, I would even say even now that the vast majority of the votes that we take on items are 5-0. So, you continue to press forward and do what you can to provide some level of communication to one another within the confines of whatever it is, the value systems that you have. But it's not partisan for a reason, and it shouldn't be. And I realize that there's a lot of fanfare if you are. And it's hard to be in the middle sometimes. You get run over on both sides, as they say. But I find that middle's good. And I think I found a comfort there.
Well, that's good. That's very direct, very purposeful, isn't it? So it makes sort of sense, really, at the end of the day. You were mentioning something there which sort of goes back to the noise thing when, folks are, you see in the local newspapers or local articles or these days blogs and things like that, how folks are, well, that's because such a body's favouring you or they've given money towards your PAC or what have you. And then the other part was something you mentioned very early on in today's interview was you were talking about how sometimes you're looking down and people just think you're rude, but you're in fact taking notes or reading things so you're able to maybe talk about them later. This must cause some type of strain on an individual. I mean, how do you deal with that? I mean, there's a lot. You've got a family. You live in a town or city. What happens to that?
I had an interesting couple of things that probably most people don't know, and I'm not a big fan of talking about personal things. I find that there's no real purpose for it in government anyway, and your problems are your own. I mean, you should care about everybody else's if you're elected and you want to go this route, and you shouldn't really, you should defer. That said, I've had an instance, this happened my first year I was mayor in 22, that I give out my telephone number to anybody who asks. Our staff at the city does the same. And there was a point in time where I had an individual threaten my life multiple times, threaten the lives of my children multiple times, said something in writing of, I know where your daughters go to school. Again, through good policing from our police department in the city of Fullerton and the Orange County Task Force, they were able to get this gentleman. And I sat in court for 3 years while this case was being adjudicated. I have colleagues of mine that serve at the state and the county level that it happened in a matter of weeks where the individual that threatened their life was sentenced pretty quickly. It took me 3 years.
Wow.
That happens. Instances where I've come out of a business lunch and somebody follows me to my car and yells at me verbally, which is their right to do. But I wouldn't think about doing that to you.
Right.
I wouldn't encroach on your personal space in that manner.
Sure.
But the public, and there's members of the public that find that that's okay. And maybe it is in their value system. It's just not mine. So there is a personal toll that is reflected in the negativity and the partisanship. I think you'd have to be, a stone to not have that.
Right.
And there's a toll. I suppose it's the weight of the position, perhaps. Perhaps it's the sheer volume of the moment. I don't know, and I'm not wise enough to say. I do find a lot of grace in prayer. I find a lot of comfort in the Lord. My family stays off of social media, thankfully.
Now, I want to ask you a last question, which you can contemplate for a moment, because, we always ask our guests, as you know, if there's anything was missed, have a free mic moment and to share your piece there. But just before you do, I know there are also some very positive things that you've brought to the city. So before we move on to that, do you mind sharing some of the positive things that you've seen happen whilst you have been sat on that dais?
There are uniquely impactful things that you can do on a city council. And they require some real thought, some real work oftentimes. I have a council colleague of mine that for a very long time wanted to get a cultural institution in Fullerton rolling again. He didn't, born and bred in the city, he had seen better days of this institution. And he took it upon himself in this particular case to shoulder the burden of returning this institution back to, put some luster on it. He did a great job doing it. But it required him to take time away from his family and address some of these problems, go to board meetings of this institution and get to know the folks that sat on this board, and get them to unify in terms of their goals, perhaps even be realistic in terms of their goals. And they listened. He was convincing. He took time. And as a result, the institution had some of its best events that we had seen in a very, very long time. Not just in crowd turnout, but in participation and hopefully revenue generation for them. Because he took it personally. He wanted to make a difference. And it could be these very small things. It doesn't have to be, I repaired every street in a year. You couldn't do that anyway.
No.
We're 23 square miles. If we tried to address every street in 1 year, do you have any idea the gridlock that we would have in the city? We'd be paralyzed.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be something so, large and so scaled. It could be something that is very unique, very thought out, and very patient in process. That's often government. So, I tell folks, you are not going to hear from me often. I come on Chamber Talk from my love of the Fullerton Chamber, DBA, North Orange County Chamber. My respect and profound adoration for you and the folks that support the chamber. And so I say some of these personal things, but more often than not, you shouldn't hear from me.
Right.
I'm certainly not that important. I'm not the president. I'm not the governor. I'm just somebody trying to make a difference. And hopefully if I do that enough, and more days than not, I think in the end, it was all worth it.
Well, it's very kind of you to say, and I think that's it's very strong sentiment there. So, as I mentioned before, we might have missed a question to ask, or there might be something you'd like a message to share to the audience. Would you like to spend a bit of time? Because I know you like jacking my mic when you have an event. So,
I tell my kids, and I advise folks that this country's seen dark times, and our city has seen dark times before. And the people have always found the will to never be succumbing to that darkness, but rather they find a way. They find a path forward, and it is the brilliance of the unique American experience throughout history, modern or otherwise, that through sheer effort, various folks and collectively as a country, we make every year perhaps better than the next. So the one thing I would encourage all of your listeners and your viewers, don't lose hope. That sometimes it's the last thing we ought to cling to, for good reason. We'll be okay.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor Jung, for being on today. Really do appreciate your time.
Appreciate your time. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, listeners, for tuning in to Chamber Talk. Until next time, stay inspired and connected by visiting nocchamber.com and selecting sign up for news at the homepage. For more interviews, visit chambertalk.podbean.com.